In today's episode of the KC Sports Authority podcast, the Kansas basketball season is officially upon us, and it's time for our annual season preview. JB Spencer and I will dive into the outlook of the team, talk about some of our lineups and predictions for playing time, of course, get into some of the statistics, and of course, talk about the schedule and where we anticipate the Hawks end up at the end of the season.
It was good, y'all. It's your boy JD6 here with my man. Shout out to KC Sports Authority. Make sure y'all go check that podcast out, man.
You heard the man.
All right, guys. Welcome into the KC Sports Authority podcast. Guys, it is officially basketball season, and I know we've got a great football team right now with that monster win over Oklahoma last weekend. But, guys, basketball season is here. The Jayhawks have already stepped foot on the court with one exhibition game and another one this week. But, guys, it's basketball season. How are we feeling?
Dude, I'm not ready. I'm not ready, man. It doesn't even necessarily have to do with the fact that KU just beat Oklahoma in football. Like, what? We just beat Oklahoma. But I'm just loving football these days, man. And it's not a bad thing. It's never a bad thing. Don't get me wrong that basketball season is back, but man, it's got to bring some excitement for sure. I'm excited for the university, excited for the students that get to experience it for the first time as a student. I'm excited for all the dunks, all the lobs, just the constant excitement. It's going to be a good season.
I'm always ready. It's hoop season. This is your favorite time of year.
I'm ready in May. I'm always ready, man.
Spencer is always hooping, no matter what time of year it is.
It's year-round sport, man.
It's weird being excited about basketball while still being excited about KU football in a second year in a row that we're kind of in that same boat. So hopefully you've gone back and listened to our Oklahoma recap. If you haven't, go check it out because that was a super exciting game. But yes, it is basketball season. Your number one preseason ranked Kansas Jayhawks are getting ready to set off their season here in a couple days, a little over a week away from the time of this recording. A lot of excitement. You know, we've talked throughout the offseason about the new additions to the team, some of the departures. I guess let's just kind of start here first with the roster and just kind of give you guys a good rundown again. Obviously, everything starts with the big, huge transfer of Hunter Dickinson in the offseason, probably the biggest offseason acquisition for college basketball in the history of the transfer portal. So we already know that. We've already talked about that a lot. Starts there with him. You know, next biggest thing is probably Kevin McCullough coming back for a senior season, which, of course, we've talked about that too, coming back. And so him, Hunter Dickinson, DeJuan Harris, and KJ Adams are kind of your main core. And then a couple other new faces. Of course, we've talked about some of the additions of the young guys in El Marco Jackson, what he's going to do. We'll talk about, you know, his outlook as far as the season goes. Of course, Nicholas Timberlake, the other upperclassman transfer, sharpshooter, how he will fit into the team. We've talked about that a little bit. Jamari McDowell, again, another guy that hasn't had enough time to be talked about, so we'll get into a little bit on him. Former fan favorite Christian Brown. We brought in his older brother, Parker Brown. And then Zach Clements decided to turn things around and come back. Of course, you know, we talked about Chris Johnson, who was original recruit, left. And then, of course, we brought in Arterio Morris, and he is now gone. I know we didn't dive in too much into that. But that's kind of where the roster stands. Still a pretty solid roster. We got a lot of depth there, a lot of exciting pieces.
Don't forget about Furphy.
Oh my gosh. How did I – it's because we haven't seen him yet. Johnny Furphy, the other late addition over the summer, reclassified. Wow, I don't even know how I forgot that. That's embarrassing. But, yeah, Johnny Furphy joins the team. Long, big, athletic wing forward type player. Didn't get to see him in the Illinois exhibition game. He's kind of been dealing with a little bit of injury, sickness, whatever, and kind of a late start. But we'll get him in there. And he's obviously already on a preseason watch list. So very exciting roster. Let's start with this, guys. Where are you guys from the last – it's probably been a few months since we've really talked about the roster itself, probably since the Johnny Furphy edition. Now that it's been a little bit of time, we've had late night, we've had one exhibition game. Just what are the thoughts roaming around your guys' head about this roster heading into the season and where it might stack up with the rest of college basketball? Of course, they're ranked number 1 to start the season, but give me your take on how we're feeling about this roster now that it's set for the season.
Toward the end of that Oklahoma preview for the football episode, that was kind of brought up. Basketball was brought up, and one of the things I had mentioned was I don't think we're deserving of that number 1 preseason ranking after losing Arterio Morris. Obviously, with that situation, he can't be in a Kansas uniform, and rightfully so. But I do think, and this is just from a pure basketball standpoint, I do think he was a huge piece to our team that we lost. And so now we don't have to get too much into the specifics with that Illinois scrimmage, but man, I mean, we really could have used him in that game. So I'm kind of looking at this like, well, I don't know if we deserve that number 1 spot. I did say in that episode, I think we're probably deserving of at least number 2. But even then, I think that was before watching the Illinois game. Now, after watching the Illinois game, I'm like, gosh, are we even top 5? I have my thoughts about the game. I'm just like,
if Bill Self was being interviewed right now, it would be, we're terrible, we're awful. this is gonna be, we're terrible, but we'll get there.
Exactly. So it's kind of like this. It's tough to talk about, but yeah, that was a big piece that we were missing. And funny enough, I was thinking about it. I'm like, man, you know what? Former Jayhawk. I know I didn't discuss this with you guys before, so surprise. But I think about a former Jayhawk that would be perfect for this team right now. What the one name that comes to mind for me is Devontae Graham. Oh, if we could have Devontae on this roster, how perfect would that be? Just he would slide right into that 2 spot, run the point with DeJuan. He'd be our knockdown shooter. Like, he would be unstoppable. He would be the spark that we need to close out games. He's our closer. Like, it would be just perfect. It would be absolutely perfect. But no, we don't have him. He is long gone. He's in the NBA, balling out. And but yeah, this team, we can come together with the loss of Arterio Morris. I think we can come together in time because we've got a lot of talent. We don't have the largest roster. Ideally, we start with a lot of guys and then thin it down to thin out that rotation to 7 or 8, maybe even 9 guys. But when you start with 9 guys, it's like that's who you've got. That's who you've got, and that's what you got to roll with. And luckily, out of all those guys, I think everybody is fully capable of making an impact for this team.
Well, do you guys want the good news or you guys want the bad news first?
Give me the
What's
bad.
the bad news?
Let's get the bad news. Based on our starting 5 yesterday, I think we made 3 threes all game. And that is going to be a plague of ours. And I have another spoiler alert. We gave up a lot more than 3 threes on the other end. So that's my biggest concern. I am going to get into the positives. I'm not going to be Johnny Raincloud here. My biggest concerns, number 1, is shooting. We can slide if we're going to start Marco Jackson, if we're going to start Furphy, whatever the case may be. You have a guy at that point. You have 2 guys that can, at least competently shoot coming into the season, and one of them is our starting 5. It's never a great thing it's great to have a stretch 5, but he cannot be your primary threat from 3. You have guys that can hit open shots in DeJuan and McCullough. But all in all, we're going to need to rely on a perimeter threat, because if we're going to dump it off to Hunter and allow him to be kind of the offensive guy that we run all the sets through, there's not going to be any spacing. Teams are just going to crash in the paint because they're okay leaving McCullough open or DeJuan open if they're going to shoot in the 20s in the 3. So that's my primary concern. I do think there's a little bit of a lack of depth. If Hunter goes out in foul trouble, how well is Parker going to come in? And, defensively, he can grab boards, he can be a body. But offensively, are we going to be able to play down low? Or are we going to completely lose that side and have to run just around the perimeter offense sort of thing? So those are some concerns. Now, I do think there's a lot of things to be excited about. Like losing Morris definitely lost us some depth, but I still think we have a lot of versatility. I think we have a lot of lineup versatility. I think Bill's going to throw out a couple different ones. I don't think it's going to be the same starting five all throughout the season. And so that's going to allow them to experiment. That's going to allow them to kind of figure out what identity they want on offense, on defense. And we have two of the best perimeter defenders in the entire country. So we are going to be giving backcourts HE double hockey sticks in the entire season. So that is definitely what I'm most excited about. And again, when it comes to winning in March and April, you need to have individual players who can play well and who can go out and get you buckets. College compared to the NBA, it's a lot more team oriented. You're not seeing as much ISO. You're not seeing as much one-on-one play. But at the end of the day, if we need a bucket, if we're down two, closing minute, we need somebody that can go out and get that for us, and we do have that in Hunter, and we could have that with Marco, with Timberlake, with Furphy. There's a lot of versatility and a lot of things we can play it. So overall, I'm very excited. I'm kind of with JB. I'm not sure if especially after the loss of Morris, I'm not sure if preseason number one. I don't really like that expectation, but I think there's no reason to doubt that we can make a late run into April this year.
Yeah, KU is going to have one of the best rosters in the nation, like they always do. They're going to figure this out. It's early. We haven't even had a chance to look at Johnny Furphy yet. But a lot of exciting things about the roster. But before we get into rotation and depth and minutes and all that, which of course we're going to do, let's talk about a couple other headlines coming into the year. And of course, we haven't discussed this on the podcast yet. And I know we're not going to dive in much now because there's nothing we can do about it. But that is the results of the IARP case that came out a few weeks ago. And the 2018 Final Four banner has been pulled down. The wins have been taken away, despite the confusion and questions of what was Silvio cleared to play? Was he not cleared to play? It happened, and the NCAA ruled, and they ruled against Kansas's favor. Now, the way it went down, though, you could tell the university was very pleased with what the results ended up being. I think that was the best case scenario of what was likely to happen, if that makes sense. Like, we got off pretty scotch-free, if we're being honest, in the bigger picture. Still a lot of frustration with it because obviously KU, I think, got slammed when other universities have gotten nothing. Duke, Zion Williamson, DeAndre Ayton, Arizona. How KU's getting blamed for some of those, I have no clue. We all know Zion wanted to go to Duke from the get-go, and it had nothing to do with money. Same thing with DeAndre Ayton, but we'll don't have to get into that. But any thoughts you guys do have that you want to include about the IARP case and maybe how that could impact the season, or where does it leave us moving forward as a program?
It's tough to say if there's really going to be a big impact because, so much of it was in the past, and I think we avoided what we all wanted to avoid, which was the dreaded postseason ban. It would have never made any sense to punish kids that had nothing to do with Kansas when we even had Silvio. This was, like 6 years ago. I mean, this was so long ago to the point where the entire team is completely different. There's not a single person here that used to be there. So it was just the right move, I think, at the end of the day, to at least vacate some wins. I'm not happy about the vacated wins. Now we got to catch up to Kentucky again, but we have a shot to do that when we play them, and inch ever closer to regaining that title of winningest college program. So, all those things are great. From a personal standpoint, I just gotta say I'm mad. I'm a little mad about the vacated wins only because of the graphics that will be on ESPN and everything as they're talking about March Madness and as they're talking about the storied programs. They might not list Kansas as this school that has had whatever what is the number now, like 30 plus 40 whatever it is consecutive NCAA tournament appearances. I mean, that's a huge number, and we're number one. And I would hope that most are going to have our name there with just a little asterisk. It's ugly, but I'll keep it as long as you still see the letters KANSAS, because we are the best. I want people to know that. I don't want people to forget what we've done over all these many years of dominance, just because of some silly nonsense that went over 6 years ago. Overall, I'm happy that no postseason ban is coming. I think it's time to just move forward and continue to dominate and continue to win national championships.
Can we pause and just say how ridiculous it was that it took 6 years to figure this crap out? 6 years. Like, I know the government's slow at a lot of things. I know this is not as much the NCAA as some of this was government involvement, but 6 freaking years to decide if a guy was eligible or not. And then now you throw NIL into the mix where all of this is legal. And so now the ruling comes down when this is all legal, and you're like, well, if this happened now, no one's batting an eye. So I don't know. I don't want to get started on what happened in the past. It happened. I'm over it. KU's now 7 wins behind Kentucky, and now we got to fight to get that back, which I'm sure we will. As long as Bill Self's here, that'll happen. I think, if anything, man, he looks more poised to dominate moving forward. I mean, he's obviously on a tear with recruiting and offseason acquisitions. And I think the cloud of the investigation kind of hindered that, but now he's full steam ahead. So I think we're going to see some of the most impressive recruiting classes that we've had in a long time coming down the pipeline. And he's going to have the guys ready to go, because I think it's a point of pride to get that record back, to have the all-time win record. I know you can't just go out and purchase the Final Four again like we had. But I think now I wouldn't be shocked if he puts a dominant next 10 years in front of us that we haven't seen. But Spencer, I'm sorry to cut in there. Anything you want to add on that?
No, honestly, I mean, I think this is like, you're in school and you think you're going to get a suspension and you get a detention instead. I think this was the best case scenario going into it. Like, it does kind of suck vacating the wins, but at the end of the day, two things are true. One, we still have a title from 2 years ago. And number 2, Grayson Allen missed a shot at the buzzer against us in the Elite Eight. So those 2 things are good. The NCAA can't take it away. So I am A-okay with it, because I think it kind of takes away the black cloud that's been looming around the program for all these years. And is it a little frustrating that somebody took money at a barbecue and now people have 7-figure NIL deals? A little bit. But at the end of the day, that's just the way it goes at the end of the day. And like you said at the beginning, can't do much about it.
Yeah, we still stormed. I was just going to say, yeah, we still stormed Mass Street back in 2018. I was watching the game from Burger Stand, and oh man, the scene,
he still drained that 3. That step back 3.
My gosh, I mean, I know it's a little cliche, but yeah, we'll always have the memories. But yeah, just give me the little asterisk. Just keep our name up on the the title boards and stuff. And
it's the same thing. No one doubts that Louisville won the national championship. Like, we saw it, we watched it happen.
Still got
you can take the title away, but the guys that got those tattoos and the players that lived through it, they still remember doing it. But
hey, anyway, know what? I guess I will say, I think we can all agree that the game against Villanova was voided. That did not happen. I think
that's true.
That never happened.
That's a positive way of looking at it.
Show me proof.
I'll give you that.
Never seen it.
Too bad that wasn't also Oregon too, because that was frustrating.
Yeah.
But I guess, would you guys, considering how it ended, the other scenario could have been a postseason ban moving forward. And let's say the option was we take away the 2018 title, or NCAA says you're on a postseason ban starting this year for 1 year. Which would you rather take? Because to me, it's no brainer. Take the title, take the banner down, because this is a championship team.
Oh yeah, for sure. And it goes back to we don't want to punish the kids who had nothing to do with it. So for sure. And it's unfortunate, but yeah, I mean, hey, what happened to that Villanova game, right?
I never saw it.
Never saw it.
All right, let's get a couple other headlines. Preseason awards obviously have already come out. We'll start with the national preseason All-American team, which, if you've looked at this team, this is a joke of starting 5. It is all centers and 1 guard. 4 guys that are 6'11" or taller, and 1 guy that's like 6'5", and he's not even a true point guard. Obviously, Hunter Dickinson ended up on the preseason All-American team, but he also landed on there with Zach Edey of Purdue. No surprise there. Armando Bacot of North Carolina. No surprise there. Kyle
We beat you.
Filipowski of Duke. No surprise there. And then Tyler Kolek of Marquette, who had a pretty good season last year. And I think there's a couple other guys in the country could have considered there, but Marquette's a top 10 team, so maybe that's deserving. But Hunter obviously lands preseason All-American list. He's going to be a finalist for preseason or for Player of the Year award with Zach Edey, of course, and Filipowski and a couple other guys that will probably show up there. I was going through and looking at the honorable mentions, and I was just a little shocked, but not really stunned that DeJuan Harris didn't end up getting any votes at all. I think there's a good possibility that he could end up being a second or third team All-American. But just a couple other big names throw in there. Max A. Smith transferring to Texas, got some look. Tyson Walker, Michigan State. Terrence Shannon, Illinois. Ryan Kalkbrenner from Creighton. Justin Moore at Villanova. Tyrese Proctor of Duke. That's just a handful of them. Any shock, any surprise there that Hunter is a preseason All-American? I think that was pretty much the expectation the second he transferred in.
No.
What do you guys think of the rest of that list? The all big man lineup.
Man, I think it's funny that the landscape in the NBA and college is just completely flipped. Like there's like 3 good big men in the NBA, and in college we're still playing like it's the 80s. You can still put your back to the basket and be an effective player. So I'm not surprised. Play styles are obviously a little different. All the guys you mentioned, I wouldn't take any of them off, even Edey after the 16th seed debacle. No surprises for me. I think they're all pretty willing. I really wish Filipowski would have went to the NBA because I don't want to have to deal with him again at Duke. So that dude was a nightmare matchup wise. So, but no,
I think it's just weird that they finally went with the 5 best players technically versus all right, we're gonna name the best player at each position, which I totally understand. I think the NBA's gone a little bit more that route too. Is who are the guys that could kind of be you can't just be all 5 big men necessarily, but if all 5 big men are the 5 best players in college basketball, okay, then I get it. Then maybe we just got to not look at it as a traditional 5-man lineup anymore. Just the All-American team is the 5 best players that we think deserve that title.
I was just going to say that I think, yes, it's great that it's the 5 best players because, really basketball as a sport, even today in college and in the NBA, I think there's always going to be a stress moving forward of trying to make this a positionless game. And when you have a positionless game, there's a lot more switching. It's a lot more dynamic. It's a lot more team oriented. It's a really fun product to watch. But when you're naming the top 5 players and making that list off the top 5, I think some of those guys, at least in this year's list, some of those guys are benefiting from that because I'm looking at these guys like, wow, they're a little lucky that it's not based off of their team because I wouldn't put Purdue up there after what happened in last year's tournament, and I wouldn't put North Carolina up there with Armando Bacot. I mean, they didn't even make the tournament. It's like. I just look at some of these guys like, yeah, they're great, but if your team is lacking, then I don't know. I think it kind of devalues them a little bit, but that's just one man's opinion. But yeah, I think all these players are great. Hopefully Hunter is named the best, and it's indicative of a tremendous KU season. And we're smiling a year from now, or not even a year from now. We're smiling in April with a natty.
The one weird thing about this list I will throw out there, which has nothing to do with Kansas or even the Big 12, I was doing a little bit further dive into, and Tyler Kolek of Marquette has also been named the Big East preseason player of the year. But get this, he is not listed on the preseason Big East first team. He's a preseason All-American, a preseason player of the year in his conference, and he did not land on the first team All Big East Someone explain that to me. I have no idea that makes sense. I just thought that was odd. Obviously, it has nothing to do with us, of course, but there's that little nugget for you. Okay. Big 12 preseason awards. This list came out not that long ago. And of course, this has a lot of Jayhawks on it. The first preseason award is Player of the Year, which to no surprise was Hunter Dickinson. He also is Newcomer of the Year, projected to be Newcomer of the Year because that's a big time addition, a guy that you're hoping averages 20 and 10. A lot of newcomers to the Big 12, a lot of new faces. But clearly, I think this is, again, another one that they got right. If Hunter Dickinson's a preseason All-American, then he should probably be preseason Player of the Year. So I don't think that's a shock at all. A couple other guys that probably could fight for that still. I think Max Asmus out of Texas could have a chance later in the year. LJ Cryer out of Houston, maybe. But the preseason All Big 12 first team is LJ Cryer, who oddly enough transferred from Baylor to Houston within the conference. So that's kind of odd. Hunter Dickinson and DeJuan Harris out of Kansas. So you got two of the top five there. Emmanuel Miller out of TCU and Max Asmus out of Texas. Not shocked that DeJuan Harris is first team Big 12. I think that's quite accurate. I was a little surprised that we didn't get three. I kind of thought Kevin had a really good shot getting first team. He's an honorable mention, so you could technically count that second team. And then the rest of the guys on the honorable mention list, Jalen Bridges out of Baylor, who's probably going to have a good year. Ray J. Dennis out of Baylor. Jacoby Walter out of Baylor. Jamal Shedd out of Houston. I think he was also one that could have been first team over Max Asmus. Arthur Kalum out of K-State and Tyler Perry out of K-State. And then Texas has just a ton of guys. Dylan Dessou, Tyrese Hunter, and Dylan Mitchell. And then Jesse Edwards, the transfer from Texas Tech to West Virginia. But what are your guys' thoughts on that preseason list? Do you think it's fair for KU to have two on there? Should they have three? Does KJ get any consideration? He wasn't on this list.
I think it's fair. I mean, KJ, he's fantastic, but he hasn't led the team really quite yet. Kevin, he's still got plenty that he can prove. I think overall it's fair, but I look at this team like we're pretty well rounded. I love who we have. I love some of our core guys. I think there's other teams that can say the same thing, but at the end of the day, all these preseason things don't really matter too much, at least for me. So I'm just kind of looking at it like, okay, cool, thanks, and moving on.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to agree. I mean, I could say you put all five of us on there. Throw Marco Jackson in there if you want. No, I don't think there should be any surprise, obviously, with Dickinson and Harris. I think McCullough, when it first came out, I was also a little surprised. I think the limitations for him offensively are maybe keeping him out a little bit. And, you have DeJuan that's not going to put up 20 points a game either, but he controls the tempo of the offense. He's one of the best passers in the league. So he has offensive skill sets that can make him dominant on both sides without having to score a bunch of points. Whereas McCullough, as dominant as he is defensively, is it going to be, can he score? Can he play make? Can he facilitate? So that's probably what kept him off, at least my best guess. And then KJ sort of same thing. I mean, I think Big 12 is pretty stacked with front court players, so I think it was going to be pretty challenging for KJ to be there. Now, when KJ, if he does be a 4-year player, you will not be surprised to see him later on in that position, especially as he develops as a player. So, I'm not going to get greedy. I'm not going to say we should add 3, 4, 5, add a 6th one for us. But I definitely think Dickinson and DeJuan are well deserved.
Yeah. I do think Kevin's got a really good chance of earning that by the end of the year. I think I know we'll get into this when we talk about minutes, rotations, and expectations. But I think Kevin's poised to have that Jalen Wilson type jump of a season. You may not score 18 a game, but I think he's going to be much more impact. So I think he could play his win there. I do think, though, KU's got enough there that if we had an all defensive team, I think KU could have 3 guys on there with, of course, Kevin and DeJuan. And I think KJ could sneak in there. And then depending how Hunter didn't look good Sunday defensively, I'll give him that. But he's capable. I think that's probably going to go to someone like Dylan Dessou at the 5 spot. But KU could get 3 guys on the all defensive first team. And I think El Marco could, if he has a good season, could fight for, freshman of the year. Maybe not newcomer, because I do think that goes to Hunter. Okay, so that's some of the kind of season headlines, preseason headlines before we get in there. And of course, we didn't even talk about Johnny Furphy there. He's on a watch list for, small forward of the year, as well as, Dewan's on the point guard list. Kevin McCullough's on a list. KJ's on a list. I think all 5 of those guys are on a list. I think El Marco's on a freshman list too. So a lot of lists. Of course, it's all going to be determined on how they actually play. But before we get into, roster projections for minutes and all that, let's just kind of quickly go through the schedule here. First game coming up Monday, November 6th in the Fieldhouse against North Carolina Central. Then they have Manhattan, the Manhattan of New York on Friday. And then it's, that Super Tuesday, the Champions Classic of KU versus Kentucky, the first real major game on the schedule. Obviously, this one's going to have a lot more juice now that we're 7 wins behind. So I think KU is going to come out with every intention to beat the crap out of them. And now it may not go that way necessarily, but I think that's how KU is going to come out and play. So that's a big time matchup there. And then you've got Eastern Illinois on the 28th, and then kind of sandwiched in between there is the oh man, I'm forgetting the tournament that they're at this year.
Maui?
Is it the Maui Invitational with Chaminade? I know they're playing Chaminade, but I can't remember the details of that off the top of my head.
Invitational. Yeah.
And then right after that, you have another huge matchup against UConn at home. Of course, UConn, the defending national champs, preseason number 6 in the country, but they come to Lawrence Friday, December 1st, which is just about a month away, if you believe that. Then we got UMKC, and then, of course, our Missouri rival Saturday, December 9th. Another home game this year against Missouri, so that's kind of a favorable schedule so far. Some of these big games are home games. Then at Indiana, which will be a monster game. Indiana is a tough place to play no matter how good they are, and, of course, they're very good this year. Took a couple transfers. I think we're not happy that Mackenzie Mbako went there, even though he's got his off-the-court issues. But Indiana's going to be a tough test. We got Yale, Wichita State to close out non-con play. And then, of course, our Big 12 schedule, which we'll see UCF for the first time in Big 12 play. We'll see Cincinnati for the first time in Big 12 play. Houston, big first time. No surprise there. Houston's really dominant. KU's got a really tough, I think, conference schedule. They end the season with Baylor, K-State, and Houston as the last 3. And if you throw Texas in there, 4 of the last 5 are against teams I anticipate being top 25 teams by that point in the year. So pretty stacked schedule like usual. Bill Self's been doing this the last several years, scheduling heavy non-con matchups. But as you guys are going through that, obviously the Kentucky UConn game is going to stand out. But any other games on that schedule that interest you or are intriguing? What do you expect out of the non-con schedule as far as KU's success?
It's scary looking at that Indiana game, just kind of knowing how we played on the road in Champaign against Illinois. Again, the game didn't mean anything, but it's just kind of one of those things where it's early enough in the season to where I'm not sure if we're going to have our identity yet. And certainly we have a lot to prove, and I think we want to be able to go in there, kick their butts. Mackenzie Mbako should have chosen Kansas. But I'm looking at that one. That's actually a sleeper for me as one of the scarier matchups because I think we're better than Kentucky. I think we're better than UConn. We're going to, play them at home. It's going to be a solid test, obviously. But, man, I got to think we're going to win that game. The energy around it, I just don't want to see us lose, of course. But I don't think we will when we're playing it in Allen Fieldhouse. Mizzou doesn't scare me at all, of course. That'll be a win. So I'm just
especially as a home game.
Oh, yeah. It's like I think it'll be another it'll only be a disappointment if it's not another 50 burger that we drop on them where we're just scoring and in bunches and just destroying them and winning by 50. That would be nice. A win by 40 would be a little bit of a disappointment. I'm looking at this schedule is tough, but man, the conference play is a little scary. We are preseason number 1 right now, according to the analysts. So I don't know. Maybe they see something, and I'm going to hang my hat on that and think that we come out of that schedule looking pretty good, and we're going to have a really, really good seed, if not a number one seed, in the tournament in March.
Yeah, I mean, I got North Carolina Central circled, man. It's going to be tough. No, I'm just kidding. No, there's a couple games that I have definitely circled on there. I'm really looking forward to the Indiana game. That's a good squad, and I want to see how well we play on the road. I think that's going to be a very good preview of road games for conference play, especially going into some of the new teams that are in the conference there. So Indiana, I'm really excited to see. UConn's a big athletic team defending, national champs like you talked about. I'm curious to see how this team handles, larger size athletic teams that can, run in transition, that can, go against our, defensive minded guards and how we match up against that. So overall, I love it that Bill, just completely comes at the team with a strong, non-conference schedule every year. And I think this one has got quite a few good matchups in there. And then conference play is going to be really tough. We added some really good teams in there. Houston is always a great team, so they're going to be really hard to go against. And, adding teams like Cincinnati and stuff like that. So a couple of good ones. I would really want us to be heading into conference play in the top 5, at least, so we have a good outcome on the non-conference. So I think that's going to be a pretty good testament to how the season's going to play out overall.
Yeah, like I said, this is a stacked schedule for the most part. You've had a couple easy cupcakes here and there like we usually do. But really, there's not a lot of time in between the big time matchups. Like after Kentucky, it's 2 weeks to UConn. That's probably the longest stretch in between really tough opponents. But then UConn to Indiana is about 2 weeks, but you got Missouri in there. Indiana's the one that I'm probably worried the most about from a non-con perspective, because it is on the road. You get Mizzou at home, you get UConn at home. Kentucky, of course, is a neutral court. But the Indiana one's a big one on the road. Even the Wichita State and Kansas City, it just feels like it could be a weird one. I hope it's not. But then you get into conference play, and to me, this is several years in a row, even though the Big 12 did not win the national championship last year. I think the Big 12 is the best basketball conference in America. And it got even stronger this year, adding Houston. I know we're going to lose Texas and Oklahoma, but adding Houston is huge from a basketball standpoint. They've been really, really good under Kelvin Sampson lately. This is a loaded Big 12 team, or Big 12 group of teams. KU's still going to be the favorite to win the Big 12, but this could be a year where, maybe it's 6 or 7 losses could still win you the Big 12. I don't think that's too crazy to say, because I don't see how Kansas goes through this Big 12. And, are we confident that they take 2 from Houston, that they win both matchups against Texas, that they don't randomly drop some unnecessary game like at West Virginia or at Oklahoma State? This is a pretty stacked conference play. This is kind of like, I think, that the SEC football schedule, just Big 12 basketball. So a lot of interesting matchups there. I do still feel pretty good about this being another 30-win season. I know I just said that the Big 12 is really, really tough, but if KU takes care of business where they should, coming through the end of Big 12 tournament and March Madness, they could still be a 30-win team. But what do you guys think the ceiling is as far as wins? They've got 29 games on the regular season.
Gosh, it's tough to say. I was thinking about how many losses that we're going to have, and I keep coming back to the number 7, just overall. And I don't know if that's one way or the other, super optimistic, or wow, like you're selling this team short. Or I think that of course, they're going to have a tough schedule, but I like to think that our experience with the Puerto Rico games over the summer will translate into some momentum in some form or fashion. Looking back now, thinking about it, even just in this moment, it seems like it was a while ago. It kind of was. But, I think this team has so much potential. And I think you said it earlier, a lot of our bigger games are home games for us. We win the Big 12 by protecting the home court, and that's going to be no different in this new look Big 12, in my opinion. In Houston, I'm not going to deny that they're a really, really good team, but I think last season we were all clamoring for, just wait until you get into the Big 12, because we're looking at this team like, man, they don't face anybody. They don't face anybody. Like they're in this cupcake league, at least compared to the Big 12. Well, now they're in the Big 12, and they get to experience the gauntlet that it is. So I think a lot of teams are going to face that. A lot of teams are going to see that adversity, the parity within the Big 12. But I think Kansas can still rise above it. I think back to there were some years where we looked at the Big 12 like, it's going to be another gauntlet. Here we go. And then Kansas actually does really well and might only have a loss or two tops in conference play. Do I expect that this year? Not necessarily, but trying to remain optimistic on this year.
I think we squeeze out with a 5-loss season during the regular season. And the reason for that is I think we drop probably one or two of the big ones in non-conference. There's always going to be some tough matchups. And do I think we're going to struggle a little bit during conference play? Maybe at times. Or do you think we drop one of those, it's against Iowa State and that's at home? Great. But I think we really protect home court well this season because these new teams are not used to playing in Allen Fieldhouse. They don't know how to go in there. They don't know the mentality. They don't know what you have to do to win in that. So I think we're going to protect home court really well. Now, it might work the opposite in our favor. We've never played at Houston. We don't play in UCF. That's a long travel too, as well with some of these games.
Yes, it is. All the way across the country.
That's going to be tough. So, I think it could work a little bit against us, but and I'll know we need to ask me the same question after I see us play against Indiana to see how good we are on the road. But for right now, initially, I think we protect home court well enough to squeeze out with, 5-6 losses.
Yeah, Indiana really is the only true road type game outside of the Champions Classic before conference play. So that's kind of interesting, We'll see how that works out. But yeah, very, very tough matchup there. Okay, so a lot we've already covered right there. And of course, there's still plenty more to get into. We want to dive into minutes and projections. And since this went a little longer than we anticipated, we're going to have that for you guys in a second episode later this week. So this first one, again, just the preseason outlook on the team, the schedule, preseason awards, just kind of what the overall feeling and take we have on the season. And then in our next one, we'll do a little bit further dive into the minutes and the rotations that Bill Self's going to throw out there. Maybe talk a little bit about some of the statistical expectations we have for different guys. So if you guys listen to this one, thank you so much. Remember, you can find our podcast on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Just search at KCSA Pod. Give us a like and a follow there so you can keep up with all the action on the podcast. And of course, you can listen to the podcast over on Spotify. Be sure to subscribe. If you like what you've listened to so far, you can rate our podcast, give us all 5s. I'd appreciate that. Or, share some of your concerns. We always take constructive criticism. And if you're watching here on YouTube, we're very grateful because this is where we're spending most of our focus. So please take the 2 seconds it takes to hit that subscribe button. I know by the time this gets up, we're going to have hundreds of views, and I know we don't have that many subscribers just yet. So please take the time just to hit that subscribe button, help support us. We would love that because basketball season is back, and you're going to see a lot more coming our way, not just football. Of course, we got plenty of football. So stay tuned for part 2 of this, of the rosters, projections for lineups and minutes, and we'll catch you guys in the next episode.